Some of the best things in life take time. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, one of the best games ever made, took 5 years to develop. The film Dune, no, not that Dune, yeah, this Dune, also took 5 years before it graced our silver screens. A Game of Thrones, the first novel in the Song of Ice and Fire series, which would then become one of the biggest shows of our time, took 5 years to hit bookstore shelves. Why am I mentioning all of this? Because 2024 marks 5 years of the Co-op Bros. 5 years of covering reviews, news, and all things co-op gaming. We've come a long way, and to celebrate this huge milestone, we recently sat down to rank nearly every co-op game we've ever played together. It was a super fun stream. We did this whole bracket tournament. Definitely check it out. But if you'd rather not sit through a 2-hour live stream, then here's only the best of the best. That's enough preamble though. Let's dive into our top 15 co-op games of all time.
The fact that we're starting off with Deep Rock at 15 is our way of telling you that we mean business, because Deep Rock Galactic is a great co-op game. The setup is simple. You and 4 friends play as intergalactic space dwarves doing what any dwarf does best, mining. Each mission has a roguelite element where you don't quite know what you'll encounter when it comes to enemies or level layouts, but thanks to the different class abilities, it doesn't really matter. These abilities are all traversal in nature and were my favorite part of Deep Rock. The fact that each class's abilities helped you navigate and shape your surroundings means you also shape how a mission plays out. When you take this unique take on class design and add in the great sense of humor, you've got an instant classic. I mean, there's literally a button dedicated to screaming for rock and stone, and a bar for you to get drinks and dance with your squad in between missions. The team at Ghost Ship Games just gets it. Glad to see Deep Rock was able to make it in our top 15 and start us off right.
Speaking of instant classics, it doesn't get more timeless than Risk of Rain 2, a 4-player online co-op roguelite featuring a ton of characters, more items than you can count, and plenty of secrets to uncover. One thing's for certain, you'll be hard-pressed to find as much replayability in any other co-op title on this list. When you start off, you'll probably get trounced by that first big boss. That's okay, because little by little, you'll start mastering a couple characters, all the while learning how to put together a god-tier build. And once all the stars align and you're having that legendary run, yeah, that's when Risk of Rain 2 really starts to sing. Of course, all of this just gets better with friends. As the difficulty ramps up, the game just turns into utter chaos as you and your friends are doing your best to stay alive. Even once you beat the final boss, there's so much left to discover with secret levels, new characters, and plenty more to keep you busy. And even then, you still got a whole DLC to play, plus another one on the way this year. Risk of Rain 2 is definitely one of the best bang for your buck co-op games on this list, so you owe it to yourself to check it out if you haven't already.
Nobody Saves the World is about as weird as its art style looks. You play as Nobody, and you can transform into multiple forms after picking up a wand that leads you onto a quest to save the world. And the transformations go from conventional, a knight, an archer, a monk, to things like a rat, a card magician, and a bodybuilder. But what helps push this title from skippable to a top 15 is how all of those forms work together. Each form has its own progression path, unique traversal, and special moves. Then you start to mix and match moves in order to create a truly broken duo like our zombie and necromancer pairing. Nothing felt better than when we brought these two out and we were able to turn hordes of enemies into zombies and demons, and we just completely obliterated everything on screen. It takes the simple idea of switching between classes in solo play to combine perks and makes it downright broken in co-op. Plus, the game has an excellent soundtrack and tone that makes the short 15-hour campaign over before you know it. At first glance, you might not think you're looking at one of the best co-op games we've ever played, but try it for yourself and you'll see what I mean.
You know, it was so cool for us to see Remnant 2 have a sort of moment last year as more mainstream gamers caught on to the fact that, yeah, Remnant and Remnant 2 absolutely slap. The first game, a Souls-like featuring 3-player online co-op, earned a cult-like following, but we never imagined it would get the sequel treatment. We're so glad it did, because Remnant 2 simply doubles down on everything the original game did and does it better. The new dual class system gives you more freedom to create a unique character and also makes it easier to synergize with your co-op partner. The special sauce of this game though is the insane amount of secrets you and your friends can discover. There's literally dozens of hours of content element that you might never see in this game, but once you do, you're in for some really engaging gameplay. Putting our heads together to solve a puzzle or figure out how to get into a secret room made for some of my favorite gaming moments of last year in Remnant 2. It's also one of the most accessible Souls-likes out there, as you can play the whole campaign with up to 3 friends. It was our number 3 game from last year, so we definitely recommend it.
Gabe and I were both really excited in the lead up to Ship of Fools back when it was released in 2022. It was a roguelite built entirely around the concept of 2 players manning a ship together through increasingly treacherous waters. Since it was a game that was intended to be played in co-op specifically, our hope was that it would be chock full of cooperative perks and abilities that you could build up and synergize as you complete a run, and the good news is, it was. It's a blast to play with a friend and does something few roguelites ever do: create a game that can be played with both the casual and non-casual gamer. Sure, the run does intensify as you go on, but I don't think it ever goes overboard in difficulty like most roguelites do. Plus, you add in the fact that it has both online and local play, with excellent shared progression, and it really drives home the fact that the team at FICA Productions knew how to make a great co-op game.
Coming up on number 10, and I'm so happy we get the chance to talk about Tribes of Midgard, as it's one of the most unique co-op games on this list. Tribes of Midgard is an action RPG featuring 10-player co-op set against a Norse mythology setting. You are soldiers sworn to defend the seat of Yggdrasil from titans that seek to destroy it, and by extension, Valhalla. Yeah, that already sounds pretty sick, I know, but let's get to the gameplay. You're mostly doing 3 things: building up defenses around your village, gathering materials to upgrade your character, and figuring out how to enter the lair of the saga boss. My favorite part of this game though is that every step of the way you have to work together and communicate with your team. You have to dictate who's focusing on gathering wood to fortify the base, or who's scouting out the next biome. But crucially, you're on the clock, as a day and night cycle puts more pressure on your squad to get things done quickly. The game boasts so many different mechanics, but somehow manages to make them all work, and even better, make them work in co-op. To this day, I honestly wish we could be playing Tribes of Midgard and experiencing all the new updates they've added. So after hearing all of that, you should be thinking, man, I have to check this out. To that I say, yes, you should.
One hill that I'll always be willing to die on is that Endless Dungeon is a fantastic co-op game. As Gabe just talked about with Tribes of Midgard, we love titles that force you to constantly dialogue about what to prioritize and focus on as a team. Perhaps no game does that better than Endless Dungeon. Its genre soup is what helps deliver that punch, a top-down, hero-esque twin-stick shooter with both roguelite and tower defense mechanics that make you really think about the best course of action in the middle of a run. That may sound like a lot, you're probably feeling a little bit taken aback, but the basic idea is you enter a floor and have to get a payload from one side to the other. To do that, you need to decide which doors to open, where to place turrets, which perks to prioritize, which currencies to gather, which character is best suited where, when you think you can risk moving the payload to get more rewards, and when it's time to call it quits. Okay, now I am getting a little overwhelmed as well, but all in all, it comes together fantastically with a knockout art style to boot. Don't let the haters sway you, Endless Dungeon deserves to be in the top 10.
Sons of the Forest launched with a half-baked storyline, lots of missing features, and even then, we still loved it and gave it a spot on our top 10 list of last year. Since then, it's received a ton of updates, most notably an actual ending, and finally launched onto 1.0 earlier this year. Naturally, we hopped back into the game. With its full release, we finally had a clear picture of what this game was, and ultimately, this is the conclusion we came to. Sons of the Forest is the best co-op survival game on the market, full stop. First off, I have to talk about the island itself. It's one of the most immersive settings we've ever played, and it's perfect for this survival game. There's all these little details, like the sounds, the way the light breaks through the trees, and especially all the ways the creepy cannibals stalk you through the woods. Surviving in Sons of the Forest is definitely a team sport. You need to work together to build a base, brave the elements, and keep each other fed and hydrated. You could just do that for, well, as long as you can, but the real fun comes in uncovering the mysteries at the heart of the island itself. Theorizing and piecing together the mystery is definitely a highlight of this game. Ultimately, Sons of the Forest builds on everything the original game set out to do, and it's an easy recommendation from your boys.
When V Rising was first released into early access in 2021, it took the world by storm, or more accurately, the gaming world by storm. So much so that it's actually the first ever title that Gabe and I played in early access. and to this day is the best title we've ever played in early access. But before I get into why it deserves that praise, I want to recognize that almost all of the indies we've talked about today are on this list for the same reason. They take one genre and twist it perfectly with 1, 2, or 3 more, and then sprinkle the co-op play on top of it. V Rising is no exception to that. It takes a tried and true genre that always plays well in co-op, survival titles, and mixes it with top-down ARPG Diablo gameplay to make a game that still sticks with us 2 years later. So you get all the perks of playing a survival crafting game with friends, but you're also getting the perks of a Diablo game with different classes and abilities to use in action. It's one of the few survival titles where I can confidently say it actually is excellent in co-op, in part due to the boss battles, and it's why it's sitting oh so close to the top 5 on our list.
While Remnant 2 had its moment last year, the talk of the town this year is none other than Helldivers 2, for good reason. It's been a minute since Andrew and I had so much fun with a mission-based game like this, and especially one that all our friends also hopped into. Helldivers 2 really exemplifies the best of co-op gaming in that it's just plain fun with friends. You really have to communicate with your squad lest you accidentally call in an airstrike too close to them. Trust me, we've all been there. The tone plus the ragdoll physics and the crazy arsenal just make it so easy for shenanigans to be had, and I love it for that. On the harder difficulties though, you definitely have to lock in and make sure everyone is bringing the right stratagems and working together to get the job done. It's also just been a blast to see the team at Arrowhead continue to keep the game relevant with the major orders. With the way it's going, I think Helldivers 2 will be here for a long time, and that's not something you can say about a lot of live service titles. If you've yet to join the Galactic effort, here's your reminder to enlist.
Divinity Original Sin 2 is why I love that Gabe and I started this channel in the first place. It's a game I never would have played on my own, but after a few sessions I quickly realized why I'd been missing out. Divinity does everything a CRPG is supposed to do, but does it flawlessly. Excellent RPG mechanics, tough decisions to argue over, copious attention to the smallest details, and a long winding story to discover that pays off beautifully on the other side of 100 plus hours. But what has always baffled me is how accessible this title is in co-op. Online co-op, local co-op, split screen, or shared screen. It packages all of that into one and even does it on the Switch. Outside of the fact that this game is approaching its 7th birthday and has been outshone by another game that will be brought up in a few short minutes, you could easily make a case that this right here is the best co-op game of all time. But before I start to second guess myself, let's move on to the next title in the top 5.
Monster Hunter World is the only game on this list without a dedicated video on the channel, which is a total travesty considering we talk about this game all the time. World was our first Monster Hunter game and we got totally hooked on it. We picked the hardest 2 weapons, the Insect Glaive and the Shark's Blade, and we got right to work on mastering them. Monster Hunter games are admittedly not the deepest in terms of co-op mechanics, but that doesn't make them any less fun. Back in our college days, we would immediately hop online after class and play this for hours on end. Even though we have Rise as a pretty good follow-up, there's something about the environments and monsters of World that just feel so much more alive. Thankfully, we have Monster Hunter Wilds to look forward to as a true follow-up. Still, if you never checked out World, we think it's well worth your time.
Before I talk about our number 3 title, I should probably apologize to our longtime viewers who have heard our origin story a few times before. But the reason Gabe and I have been friends for the last 14 years is because one day Gabe came to my house, dropped this little beauty onto my desk, and told me I had to play it with him. An entire Demon's Souls campaign later, and I was itching for something more, so I googled games like Demon's Souls, and to my surprise discovered a spiritual successor had released just a few months prior called Dark Souls. So I told my guy about Dark Souls, we bought 2 copies at the local GameStop, and the rest is history. So yes, you can argue in the comments about all the ways that Dark Souls makes for an overwhelmingly frustrating cooperative experience, and you know what, I'll nod along. But deep down, I know that sharing the journey through Lordran with your best friend is irreplaceable, and all these years later, I stand by that sentiment.
Wait, we're coming up on number 2 on the list with It Takes Two? Are we saying that It Takes Two is in fact not our number 1 co-op game of all time? That's right, viewer, it was a tough debate on the stream, but hey, being runner-up on a list of nearly 100 titles is a huge feat, and It Takes Two still deserves all the flowers 4 years later. It's still crazy to me that this game won Game of the Year at the Game Awards back in 2021. A co-op only game that wasn't an open world or an RPG, and featured a pretty annoying character. But when you think about it, maybe it wasn't as crazy after all. It's a game that manages to switch genres like every other hour of gameplay and pulls it off seamlessly in an incredible 15-hour co-op campaign. Every challenge, level, or puzzle tasked you with working together in both fun and inventive ways. And best of all, it's a game that can be enjoyed by nearly everyone. Two best friends, couples, a parent and their child, It Takes Two has something for everyone, and for that, it's well deserving of our number 2 slot on this list.
I knew that Baldur's Gate 3 was going to be amazing. I mean, Divinity for the longest time was the best game we played for the channel. But did I think it would turn out to be one of the best games of the century? No, I did not. But here we are on the other side of 2023 with all of the trophies and accolades, and I can confidently make that statement knowing only a few knuckleheads will argue with me in the comments. It does everything Divinity does flawlessly, and does it just a little bit better somehow. More immersive characters and stories, more customization to your characters, and still all of those co-op options with both online and local play. Sure, it doesn't fit on the Switch, but it does fit on the Steam Deck, so we'll give Larian the pat on the back they deserve. It's hard to imagine we'll ever see another game like this for years to come, especially when you talk about co-op games. But I'm okay with that. We'll be back in 5 years to see if that ever changes. Well guys, there you have it. 5 years of hard work and 14 years of friendship distilled into a 17-minute YouTube video for your viewing pleasure. If this was enjoyable and you walked away with a larger backlog, consider subscribing and liking the video. A huge thank you to all of our fans who have been on our journey with us since the beginning, and to all of our friends who have played many of these titles with us on this list. Plus, I want to give a special shout out to our patrons who have helped us push this channel into its 5th year stronger than ever. We're extremely grateful for the ability to share our love of co-op games with you all, and I genuinely hope we'll be here 5 years later, like I said, to reflect once again. Until then, we'll catch you on another episode of the Co-op Bros.